Do you feel you were born for more? Get ready to uncover your God-given purpose so you can impact the world with your gifts, your talents, and your story. Welcome to our Purpose Power Summit. I'm your host, Mimika Cooney, and today's guest is going to share how to grow into your calling. Amy Carroll's passion is leading women to deeper delight through rich relationships with God and others. Amy is committed to opening up her whole life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, to teach the lessons she's learned in her pursuit of applying God's truth. Amy is the author of Breaking Up with Perfect and a contributing author for the NIV Real Life Devotional Bible for Women and Encouragement for Today. She also writes devotions for Proverbs 31 Ministries, Encouragement for Today, which is sent out daily to over 800,000 people worldwide. Amy is the founder and director of Next Step Coaching Services, a coaching service for Christian speakers. She is also co-host of Grit and Grace, a podcast for reforming perfectionists, people pleasers, and growing HSPs. So welcome, Amy. Welcome to the summit. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, you have to explain to everybody what is an HSP?
Well, an HSP is a highly sensitive person, which sounds, my niece said, it was so funny. She said, it sounds kind of precious, but it's not. It's actually about a biological wiring. And my friend Sherry Gregory has become kind of an expert in it. So part of our podcast is for highly sensitive people. And it turns out that I am borderline highly sensitive, and I have a son who is very high on that scale. So if your listeners want to hear more about it, come check it out.
Definitely. Well, I think a lot of us are can be in that spectrum in some shape or form, right? Yeah. Where we get a little touchy if somebody says the wrong thing, especially if we haven't had our coffee in the morning. But I'm just saying, okay, I've had my coffee. Can you tell?
I know. I've had a couple cups myself. It was a long weekend, but good.
Exactly. Well, you've got some great content to share, especially when it talks about helping godly women really walk and grow into their calling. But before we get into some juicy bits, give us a backstory of how you got started doing what you're doing today.
Well, I'm a speaker and I'm a writer, and I love both of those things. But one of the things that I do, one of the hats I wear, is that I coach other speakers. And I love that more than anything else that I do. But about 9 years ago, I was feeling really, really stuck. I had a calling when I was a little girl to be a teacher, and I had pursued that for a long time. And then God started opening doors for speaking, those kinds of things. But I needed to do something more full-time, and I just didn't know what that was. My friend was on a road trip with me, and we were discussing what this might be. And in the process, she asked, what's it like to be part of the Proverbs 31 team? How are you enjoying that? And I told her it was just an amazing experience, that when I had trouble with creating a bio sheet, I could ask our executive director. And if I had trouble creating a message, then I had someone else on the team to ask. At every step of the way, there was somebody who had walked that road in front of me that I could ask and that could help me. And she said, wow, I wonder what women do who are in ministry on their own, that are doing it all by themselves. And I just kind of pondered that for a moment in silence. And she said, maybe that's your job. And there was almost this audible click. It was in my heart and in my head. And I thought, I think that is my job. And I was able to look back and see how God had put all these things in my path over the years to prepare me for that.
So it's kind of like the breadcrumbs, right? Looking back and picking up the pieces, and you think, why have I gone through this? Like, this doesn't make any sense. But when it starts getting to that stage where everything converses at a certain stage, and you're like, oh, now I get it. Now I know how I had to do that.
Exactly. You know, I think a lot of us think that calling or purpose, as you're calling it, that it happens in this flash of lightning, that it happens overnight, that like on American Idol, that we get discovered or something, whatever your calling is. And usually it just doesn't happen that way. It certainly did not happen that way for me. It happened over a period of time. And like you said, like breadcrumbs, I think of it as our calling unfolds, or we grow into our calling rather than something happening overnight.
Exactly, like we expect some lightning bolt from heaven or the ha opera singer to
Exactly.
just announce that you are fabulous now, and like now you're allowed to do what you want to do.
An angel choir kicking it all off, and it just doesn't usually start like that.
Exactly. Well, that's what I say is let's help our audience figure out how to look at their own breadcrumbs to help them connect the dots. And usually there are signs that we haven't perhaps noticed, or maybe we just weren't aware of. So let's dive in with some great tips. We've got 3 tips we're going to cover today about how we can actually grow into our calling. So go for it.
Well, I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to glance at our past. And sometimes I've heard this philosophy that we're not supposed to look back at our past. And I think definitely we don't live in the past, but it's smart to be students of our past. So we need to glance back and really look at what are the things that have the skills that I've been given over a period of time and how have I gotten them. And when I got to this coaching piece, I could see how God had just gradually given me all these different jobs. And in those jobs, I got skills that became pertinent to what I was doing with my coaching. Just so, for example, even my job at McDonald's when I was in high school, and I had a job at an ice cream shop too. Those were 2 little jobs that seemed insignificant at the time, but they taught me customer service and they taught me how to treat people well. That was part of my training early on. And then I went on to my vocation as a teacher, and that those years in the classroom have helped me to take these big truths or big concepts and break them for people into small, understandable bites. Those years staying home with my kids and serving my husband and learning how to have a heart of service and to really put other people above myself. And then, and the speaking, of course, gave me kind of the street creds to be able to speak to other speakers and be able to coach them. And so I can look back at my past and see how everything has worked together to bring me to this point. I even had a job for 6 years, Mimika, that I was like the welcome wagon lady in my community for 6 years. And for 6 years, it was a job I really enjoyed. But I thought, I don't know what this is. It's not a career. It doesn't seem like it's leading to anything. But when I look back on that, I did 30 presentations a month. So I got to really work on my presentation skills. I also got a little bit of an introduction into the business world, which had been something I'd never done before. So I learned how to close contracts. I learned how to talk to business owners and go to meetings with other business owners. So those were things that were all really, really important.
So wouldn't you say that perhaps if we're in that situation and you're in a frustrating season, you're like, oh, what does this mean? Would you say perhaps we sort of flip the script and instead of us looking at it as a frustration or like, because we know we're yearning for something is pulling us towards us, but we have to take baby steps. What would you say to that woman who's in that situation right now, that there is something coming, but she's in what I would call boot camp season or training season?
That's a great way to think about it, is to think about it as a training season and to really mine it that way. So there were times, just for example, in that welcome wagon job that it kind of chafed at me that I didn't feel like I was doing anything significant. I would say really dig into that and start seeing like, what new skill could I learn? Who can I learn from that's around me? And pick up all that you can in that season, knowing that something else may be coming down the road where you use that skill.
And what is your view on complaining and grumbling?
Oh my goodness. Well, I can't say that I have never complained or grumbled myself, but it's so counterproductive because we hear ourselves saying these things, right? So it's better to try to choose. Our family motto, one of them is choose joy. And it really, really is a choice. And there were some times along the way that I was not able to choose joy myself. And so I just begged God, would you either change my circumstances and move me forward, like towards what I'm longing for? Or would you help me to choose joy? Would you change my attitude? And every time he answered either one of those 2 ways.
Exactly. So it's either be happy or stay and wallow in self-pity. So anyway.
Yeah. Which
We-
only hurts us. Yeah.
Exactly right. And it says in the Bible, I really believe that when we grumble and complain, it closes the heavens down on us. Like, say, I
Mm.
think of it as you have a blessing on a conveyor belt, right? This is a vision. I'm always thinking in visions. And it's coming towards you. You're at the end. And every time you complain, you press pause. So you're like, it's coming.
Mm.
And you've kind of like stopped it wants to keep moving, but we're the ones in control, because if we keep complaining and criticizing and having pity parties and all that kind of stuff, we're delaying it, not God. So I'm just saying, that's my 2 cents worth.
It's that's a very good visual. So once we glance at the past, then I think we also need to dream of the future. I am a big believer that our dreams are indicator of the purposes that God's put into our hearts. And so I think that scripture that's in Psalm, that God gives us the desires of our heart, I don't think that means that he gives us everything we want. I think it actually means he plants desires in our hearts. So what have those desires been? Even since the time you were a little girl, like I really thought, Mimika, that I might be the winner of American Idol one day, although there was no American Idol when I was little, but I wanted to be a famous pop star. I was the little girl singing into the hairbrush and dancing around her room. And of course, has not come about in my life, but I think about that God had given me a certain comfort in being in front of people that he was able to use later in my life with the speaking. So think back to those dreams, even when you were a little girl, and all along the way, maybe write them down and do some journaling. Like I gave you some questions. I asked you some questions on the handout for today, and go back and think of all those things and look for God's hand. What's the common thread? What is it that God has placed in your heart over the years that he might want to come to pass? And for some of us, that means that some dreams have to be resurrected, because it's easy to let our dreams die. It's easy to let discouragement or maybe some failures along the way crush dreams. But God wants to resurrect our dreams to bring about our purpose, his purposes in our lives.
And that definitely is a great thing to think about, because if we didn't have hope for the future, we would kind of lose steam with what we're doing now, and there wouldn't be any point, right? And for me, in my own life, I find that God plants these ideas there. Sometimes it's the waiting that really takes the time, and understanding seasons and times. Wouldn't you say that might be the hardest thing, to kind of keep hoping, keep praying while you're waiting?
Absolutely. There's one particular dream in my heart that God planted when I was 12 years old. There have been several times when I thought it was about to come to pass, but it hasn't come to full fruition yet. And that is hard. It is hard to wait for things. But I believe that God, like you said, wants us to wait with hope and to keep those dreams alive in our hearts.
Well, you did mention a little earlier that you have a handout. And I want to remind everybody, as part of our summit series, our speakers have kindly donated unique gifts that you could only get here at mimikacooney.com. So go ahead and click the download button or the link in the video, and go ahead and download Amy's guide that goes along with what she's talking with us today. And then you can help sort of take the action that you need to in order to work your out and grow into your own calling. But let's dive into your last tip. You have one more tip that's really awesome.
Well, I think that the last thing that we have to do is we glance at the past and we dream of the future, but we've got to live in the present. We need to focus on the present. And so when I thought about how my dream of this coaching had been unfolding all along, I had that audible click, that moment where I thought, I think it's time. And then I had to take some practical steps. And so I'll just give you one example. I went to the bank to open a bank account for my business. And I walked into the banker's office. I sat down, and my little naive self, I said, I want to open a bank account for my new business. And he said, okay, where are your papers? And I went, papers? And thank goodness I had a very patient banker that day who decided that he would take time and invest in this naive little new wannabe business owner. And he explained to me how to register my business with the state and told me where to go. I went downtown to our state capitol and went to register my business, and someone there helped me. And I want to encourage people that a lot of times God will put people right in place to help you along the way, that you won't be alone in doing all these steps. But Finally, I got my business registered, was able to open a bank account. And this is really important because I see two extremes, especially in the Christian world. I see one group of people who says, well, I'm not going to do anything because if I do anything, then maybe it won't be God's will. I'm just going to wait for God just to do it, kind of like that lightning bolt idea. And then I see another group of people who are like, I'm going to bang down the doors and make this dream in my heart happen. And I actually think God is calling us to some place in the middle where we do the daily things that we need to do, like opening a bank account and registering as an LLC, just as a practical, something practical that we can do. But on the other hand, that we wait for God and we're trying to stay in the center of his will, even as we work. So there's some place sort of in the middle. And I think that applies to anything we're doing, whether we're raising children at home, which is such a high calling, or we are starting a business, or we are starting a Bible study in our workplace, or wherever you are, where God has given you a bigger purpose in your heart. We still have to do those practical steps to get there.
And I really agree with that, because I've often found in my life that I'd be like, when, God, when? Like, how much longer? Oh, it's so terrible. Like, oh.
Yes.
And he's like, are you done yet? Because when you're ready, then we can get to doing the good stuff. So we're going to put on our big old panties and think, okay, I know God's got something for me. And wouldn't you also say there's a part in us, especially as women, we're so hard on ourselves. Like, I'll wake up and say, I want to do 10 things today. And if I don't do 10, I beat myself up about the 9 I didn't do instead of celebrating the 1 that I did.
Oh, that's so true. That is so true. And I'm a big to-do list girl, so I can get caught up in that really easily. So I'd say celebrate every check mark. Every time you check something off, celebrate it and just see it as a step forward, because it is.
Definitely. Any kind of movement. And I always like to say, I have to look up who actually said this. It might have been Joyce Meyer, but God can't move a parked car. You just being in a garage doesn't make you a car, but unless you want to be useful, you've got to actually get in the driver's seat, start the ignition, and then God is our compass, or he's our GPS. That's kind of, I would say, is a good way of thinking. Instead of us thinking that God has to drive the car, yes, he's driving the car of our lives, but sometimes he requires us. Because wouldn't you say that God can't just come down and do everything? He likes to work through people.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's true. My friend Lisa Turker said this so well in an interview that I heard years ago. And she said, I feel called to do everything that I can do. And then I pray that God will do what only he can do. I think we overestimate ourselves sometimes. Like, we're so afraid, we're so shut down that we might get outside of the will of God. But really, he is the one that makes things happen. And so I'm not so sure that I believe that we can go too far down that road of making things happen if our hearts are in the right place.
Yeah, and I have to confess, one of like, if the things don't happen quick enough, I want to like beat down the door and then start getting, the fire drill and then start making a huge mess. But then what happens is, if the door is not meant for me to open, I either exhaust myself or frustrate myself. And that usually is a sign that you're not doing what God wants.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If we're in tune to him, if we're spending daily time with him, if we're asking him to keep us in the lines, he is so faithful to do that.
And wouldn't you also say that this is something that kind of takes a little bit of experience and looking back? That's why I said I love what you've started with saying, is you start with looking back of where you've come from, because then you can celebrate that where you are right now, even though you're not where you really want to be. But I think it's great to be able to put all those pieces together so you can have that peace in the moment and not have to constantly sort of pine for something that you don't have yet. Because here's the thing, sometimes if God gives us everything we wanted when we want it, just like our kids, sometimes they can't handle it.
Right, exactly. And you and I have talked in the past about how we thought in our 20s we had it all together and it needed to happen right now. And guess what? I turned 50 this year. So, I mean, it is an unfolding. It happens over time, and God gives it to us when we're ready and not before. And thank goodness.
Exactly. Some things you couldn't handle.
Exactly. But now I look back, and I launched Next Step Coaching Services 8 years ago. And now I've coached over 200 speakers. And That's been a bigger blessing than I even thought. So, and I just want to encourage the listeners too that most of the time our vision is far too small. Like we think it's too big to even accomplish, but then in retrospect, it's far too small. And when I first started, truthfully, this was a way to help with my family's finances. And that was what I was looking for. And that was, my heart was to serve other women. But very early on, I remember coaching one woman that obviously was already making an impact in her ministry. And God spoke to me and said, Amy, you are not going to stand on a stage in front of thousands. I don't feel like that's my calling. So don't feel sorry for me because I'm not sorry for myself. But I felt like he said, you're not going to stand on a stage in front of thousands, but because you are investing in other people's ministries, you are going to affect thousands, just like those big name speakers that you know. That has been such an incredible vision for me, and it gives me a bigger vision for what I do, and just such a blessing. And each one of your listeners, as they pursue their purpose, they'll have bigger impact than they ever could have imagined, whether it's through the children that they've invested in, or in their office, or in their neighborhood or community. God wants us to have impact for Him.
And I think at the end of the day, as long as the Lord gets the glory, and that's where the difference is between trying to do things in our own strength, because it's like, oh, look at me, I'm so smart, I did this all myself. When we're weak, that's when God's like, yes, now I can work through you. So I just love how that all fits together. And it's a great reminder to, number one, look back at your past and celebrate your wins. Number two is to look forward to the future so you have that hope. And number three is to really just be content and present with where you are right now. In your calling. So, Amy, I got to say, I thank you so much for sharing this awesome wisdom. And again, if you haven't gone and downloaded her checklist that goes with this, go to mimikacooney.com, click on the Summit tab, and download that so you can work through that. And if you've had any aha moments or any epiphanies, definitely reach out to Amy and add a comment below this video and let us know what you learned, like things that you're going to do, anything. We would love to stand and celebrate with you as you take this next step towards activating your calling, because we know it starts with baby steps. Wouldn't you say, Amy?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And just take the steps and celebrate them.
Exactly. Well, tell our audience how they can find you online. Where's the best place to connect?
Well, there are two different places. If you're interested in speaker coaching or writer coaching, that's at nextstepcoachingservices.com. And then for me personally, it's amycarroll.org.
And all the links will be underneath the video as well. So make sure to go and reach out to Amy. Tell her you saw her on the summit. And if you've enjoyed what she had to say, share it with your friends. I'm sure you know somebody who needs to hear what we've talked about today. I'm even going to go back and re-listen to this because I know I need to make some notes. Always remind myself it's a daily growth process about celebrating the win. So go ahead and share that, whether you've received it as an email or you've seen this online. Just go and click those buttons today. I'm going to say thanks again, Amy, for joining me, and thanks again for making the time on your busy schedule. Even though we had tech issues, we made it work.
Oh, absolutely. It is my joy. I'm so glad to be with you.
Well, thanks again, everyone. Until next time, take care. Become a partner and join the Mimika TV family today.